So let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
I think Donald Trump is going through the stages of grief. I think the first stage was denial, that we could ever be on the precipice of winning this race. I think the stage that he has now reached is somewhat of acceptance.
Perhaps, and that is Zohran Mamdani. New York mayor's race and New Jersey governor's contest has national implications. Both races intensifying, too. Zohran Mamdani, his party, has a full-blown socialist as its nominee. How are they going to deal with that? They don't seem to know. And Mikey Sherrill challenges New Jersey blue state status because she is extremely vulnerable when she was sought to be a shoo-in and maybe a vice presidential nominee. We'll talk about it.
Number 2.
This is the biggest crowd Turning Point USA has ever pulled on a tour. There's over 6,500 people here today.
A lot of people wait until they're called to do something before they stand up to defend something, but Charlie didn't.
That is Alex Clark, the podcast host, and Andy Biggs. Record crowd at TP USA, 6,000 plus, returns to Utah weeks after Charlie's assassination. We bring you all the raw emotion and group's promising future.
Number 1.
We were hoping, praying that the Democrats would not take this dramatic step, and they have. Let's be clear what happened last night. 44 Senate Democrats rejected a clean, nonpartisan continuing resolution to keep the government operating.
Government shutdown. Now both sides scramble to explain their POV. The whole thing's embarrassing, and there are signs the Dems are about to break as 3 of the 8 needed already have crossed to the GOP side. You got Angus King, and you have Senator Cortez Masto also jumping to the other side. And we'll see, of course, Fetterman is a reasonable guy, says, I don't want to shut down the government. We'll see if Gary Peters and some others do that, and Chuck Schumer does lose his foundation. But so far, it's not happening. Senator Joni Ernst joins us now. Senator, can you believe 7 years later we're in another lockout?
I cannot, Brian, and it is shameful on the part of the Democrats that did not join us to keep the government open. We know that this was a clean funding bill. This was a short-term extension. And what is really unreasonable is the fact that Democrats voted against a continuing resolution, which is based on President Biden's numbers. So we're still in the Biden fiscal year from last year, and yet they couldn't bring themselves to support it. Why? Because Donald Trump is now the president.
And do you think because so much blowback from Schumer personally last time, because he said the responsible thing to do would be to not fight this battle in March and continuing to fund the government? And do you think now he's overcompensating for it?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct, Brian. He is very afraid of a primary from the far left. He's afraid of that group of his base. And so now he has to overplay it. And the unfortunate thing is, of course, there will be members of his party that suffer because of that. But most importantly, it's the people of the United States that are going to suffer during a shutdown. And this is a Schumer shutdown. Let's not forget that, Brian.
Here's what he said yesterday, cut 12.
Their bill, they call it clean. We call it totally partisan. There was no input from Democrats. Not a single line in their bill had input from Democrats. They never consulted us. Thune didn't consult me. Johnson didn't consult Hakeem. And the bottom line is that we had a partisan bill.
For number one, what's he talking about? What bill? Continuing to get the appropriations bills done, and then we fund the government. What is that? Doesn't even make any sense.
It makes no sense at all because, again, Brian, it's so laughable. He's talking about how this was partisan and there was no input from Democrats in this bill. Again, I'll remind everyone, this is their funding bill from this fiscal year. It was done under President Biden and the Democrats. This is their spending, and they decided not to renew it. So again, it is laughable. It makes no sense at all. They're trying to confuse the American people. This was an extension of Biden's appropriations and Biden's budget. and they didn't do it. Again, I'm going to go back to it is because we have President Trump in office right now. You are absolutely correct that he will be hit from the far left. He's got to fight this. But again, who's in the crosshairs? It's the American people. It is all of the government workers that try and do their jobs. So this is really, really unfortunate for everyone. Schumer will try and mislead people, but we know what's going on. It is a Schumer shutdown.
So what I understand is, talking to our sources on Capitol Hill, is Democrats have looked at everything, and they believe health care is the thing they want to run on in 26. So they want to point out the subsidies that were in there for Medicaid during the pandemic. They want to point out the illegal immigrants that were getting health care. And they want to make sure the people working, the able-bodied, were not getting Medicaid when shouldn't be eligible. They want to address all those things and say, when you cut those programs, you're cutting health care for Americans. And that's what they were bringing up. Listen to what Senator Thune said. It's a little long, but I think it's important. Cut 17.
I know you disagree with the premise of the ACA subsidies, how they were enacted, how they were extended, but the reality is you do have members whose constituents will suffer when those premiums spike. So what are you going to do about it as leader?
Well, we want to have that conversation. And I've made that very clear. I made it clear yesterday at the White House to both Schumer and Jeffries. And we've got, members, obviously they have members on their side, but we have members on our side too who are interested in the subject. I think the thing is, the one thing that we have to have is reforms, because there are issues related to that program that are just rife with fraud, waste, and abuse.
So he's open to having those talks, but you 2/3 of the budget go to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. So you are trying to rein in those programs, but the problem is that's a tough thing for politicians who want to get reelected. When you cut back a program, that's fundamentally why our budget keeps growing, and we have a $37 trillion debt.
Yes, and this is a really difficult area. It is very sensitive, Brian, but I do think it is something that we as leaders in Congress need to take a very, very close look at and really modernize our systems. We know that when we look at Medicare, just for example, Iowa, my home state, a very rural state, we get one of the lowest reimbursement rates when it comes to Medicare. And this is really unfortunate because we end up paying our doctors the same as they're paying doctors in California, because we have to lure them to our rural areas. But that's not accounted for in our Medicare reimbursements. So we have to modernize these systems, but it will take leaders that are willing to take the slings and arrows, because you're going to have people like Jeffries and Schumer, saying that we're going to push grandma off of a cliff. Not so. We want to make sure that we're getting it right for our states, that the vulnerable people and our elderly are being cared for. It is going to take a very thoughtful approach. It's not going to be something that is solved by funding activities for illegal aliens. It's not going to be solved by funding at COVID levels when we're no longer in COVID. We need to take a look at the entirety of these systems and get it right.
A couple of things I still want to talk to you about. When it comes to these when it comes to farmers, which you know everything about in Iowa, evidently they're really hurting. I had a great crop this year, but China is just refusing to buy our soybeans. Does that affect the people of Iowa? And why were they willing to pay more to go to other countries while we're in the middle of negotiations with them? Could you enlighten me on this?
Well, this is really difficult because China is choosing to do contracts with Brazil and a number of other countries. They are paying more. They are pushing back and they're sticking it to the American farmer. Of course, we're in a trade showdown over tariffs and trade with China. China is trying to stick it to America, and this is really unfortunate. This is the third year in a row we've seen declining farm revenue, and the subsidies that are brought in through the tariffs, that will be able to support our farmers for a while. But Iowans, and I know other farmers across the nation feel the same way that we do. We want trade, not aid. We do not want welfare checks. We want markets. So we have to find a way forward so our products, our commodities, can get into the hands of people in other countries or expand our network domestically, the consumption domestically. But I will say right now, farmers are hurting. It is not good. When I am traveling across the state of Iowa, there is a lot of despair right now because we have nowhere for our goods to go. So I'll be working with the president on this issue. We spoke not that long ago about expanding markets here in the United States with our types of goods and products. We need to look to one another and solve this issue. China is refusing to play right now. We've got to find a way forward.
So have you expressed this to the president? Did he let you know where it's at? Because I know every 2 weeks we seem to be meeting with them. That would be something easy to sign off on. They need it, and we have it. Do you see, did they give you an idea of what the reluctance is as opposed to the rare earth, which kicked back in, and some of the other things kicked back in?
Right. Right now, I think this is China just trying to flex their muscles, but they need our goods. They need our corn. They need our soybeans. They need our beef. They need to feed their people. They cannot do it with
Australia.
their domestic.
I heard Australia is now supplying their beef.
Yes, and so we are losing these markets. So we need to come to a consensus very soon. We saw this in the first Trump presidency with the tariffs. We lost some of our soybean market to China. We never gained that back. Other countries filled that need for China. And so my farmers right now are very, very worried that if we don't secure those contracts, we will lose that market forever. So I know that there's ongoing negotiations. We hope they wrap very soon.
So I understand that Marco Rubio and others, because we've been very aggressive with Venezuela, are looking for some type of regime change, which this president has really tried to avoid for obvious reasons. But Maduro is causing so many problems in the region, his alliances with China, as well as Russia and Iran. We know about the drug trade, TDA, that's come through our border. So Rubio will raise the bounty on Maduro for arrest or conviction to $50 million. They say Stephen Miller and Radcliffe are pushing for escalating military presence there. You're on the Armed Services Committee. Senator Joni Ernst, what do you think about this? What could you tell us?
Well, I do think that the drugs that are flowing, not just from Venezuela, but from a number of these other South American countries and elsewhere, a lot of that will be funneled in from China as well. I think it does pose a threat to the United States of America. And so I'm glad that the president and Secretary Rubio are really escalating that level of discussion. They are forcing the issue, which has not been forced in a very long time. So I'm glad that we are paying attention to the Western Hemisphere when it comes to threats against the United States of America, but we must never take our eye off of other regions. We know that China is our pacing threat. We need to make sure that we are building a military of tomorrow focused on the threat of China. We also need to, realize that there are terrorist organizations that will always reconstitute out there that pose a threat to the United States as well. So while we are focusing on our southern hemisphere, western hemisphere, we also need to recognize we can't take the focus off of our pacing threat, China, and those other terrorist organizations that pose a threat to the United States.
So have we done anything yet to expand our industrial base to build missiles, rockets, or defense systems quicker?
We are, and I've had some interesting conversations even just in the last couple of days with various manufacturers that are heavily engaged in the defense industrial base and what they are doing to ramp up production in the United States. We've identified a number of choke points in the supply chain that we need to loosen up a little bit, but we are looking for ways that we can manufacture domestically and and produce the inputs here domestically. As we're looking at rare earths, we need to do more of the mining and refining here in the United States. And if we don't have the capacity to do that, or the rare earths or minerals here in the United States, we need to be able to seek those from friends and allies, not from China.
Yeah, we got the raw material, but we don't have the refinery capacity, and the environmental regulations really hinder us when it comes to the mining part of it. So hopefully we'll loosen that up with this administration and EPA director in place. Senator, thanks so much, Senator. A lot to talk about, and so far the shutdown continues.
Absolutely. And let's get it solved, Brian. Let's get some more Democrats that are reasonable human beings that actually want to work for our citizens.
Yep. Let's see if you can get some more. They're all your friends. Senator Joni Ernst, thanks so much.
ICE, unmasked. What are you afraid of? Masked men jumping out of unmarked cars, people disappearing, no due process. People ask, well, is authoritarianism, you're being hyperbolic? Bull, we're being hyperbolic. If you're a black and brown community, it's here in this country. It's no longer the rule of law. It's increasingly the rule of Don. What an abomination. What an embarrassment. What a fraud. Facts don't matter anymore. It's narrative. Illusion rules. If you've looked at my social media, you could see I am leaning into a different paradigm of thinking.
So that is Governor Newsom. He tried the bipartisan thing, doing podcasts where he listened to people like Charlie Kirk. And he said he wasn't getting any traction, and now he's trying to heckle Donald Trump. What I think that he is totally missing, Governor Newsom, is that he's done a terrible job as governor. And number two is Donald Trump should not be your nemesis. Because Donald Trump, there's no scenario where you're running against him next. You could be running against ideas, but I also fundamentally think you should be for something. With me right now, if you're watching on the stream, you notice him fresh off his appearance on Gutfeld, Andrew Gruel, chef, founder of the popular Slapfish restaurant chain, and now the author of the Gruel Family Cookbook that's still out, and host of a weekly cooking show called American Gravy. And get this, Andrew is now the newest member of the Huntington Beach City Council. It's a 7-0 Republican City Council, right? In Huntington Beach, California.
Yeah, people talk about.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. You know, I always say there is sanity in California, but you got to look for it.
You've never said that. Actually, did you say there is sanity in California? I mean, I used to live out there. I never really thought politics. I really didn't. Like, I was there in the 90s. And, you knew I think we had a Republican governor at the time, and there was mayors. Reardon was a Republican. He was mayor for a while. But all hell has broken loose since. So when you hear Gavin Newsom make an enemy of ICE, you're somebody that is affected by illegal immigration because they go to hospitality, they go to restaurants. What are your thoughts about what the reality is on the ground when it comes to illegal immigration?
Well, first of all, Newsom doesn't talk about his lack of any action over the past 15 years in regards to undocumented workers in California, right? He's throwing a fit right now, but I got to tell you, and I know this because we had people that came and worked at the restaurant and then ultimately ended up going back to Mexico, El Salvador, wherever they were from, because they came to California. The doors they thought were open, and they tried to get their documentation. They tried to work with the state. They tried to work with local governments, every single avenue they could, and it was all virtue by Newsom. There was nobody there to help them. All these people that are screaming right now about ICE did nothing to try and help these people previously, and the lion's share of them, the good people, they actually went back to Mexico or other countries because they didn't feel like dealing with what was ultimately going to be coming down. So I think that there's, once again,
self-deportation. They said over 1 million people self-deported.
Yeah, that's true. That is 100% true. Yeah, and actually, some people did go and then have come back with visas. We've had people, who have come and said, look, I got a visa, I got a work visa, you got to go back to Mexico, et cetera. And that's how it should be done. But no one's talking about that. So this is what Newsom constantly does, is that he uses these national topics, many times they're cultural, to create just a means by which he can put himself on the pedestal or the socle. But then he never presents any pragmatic policy by which we can actually solve these problems.
Right. I think it's also important to bring out that he really has no ideas, but the last thing he wants to talk about is his own track record. Can you give everybody an idea? I know his approval rate is like 42% or 43% in California. What kind of governor has he been for the last 7 years?
I mean, it's been awful. And the reason it's been awful is because he hasn't attempted to pull together some sort of a bipartisan majority, right? And by that, I mean a bipartisan majority. He's basically accepted and the fact that there's this galvanized supermajority amongst the Democrats, and he's used that to try and collect more and more power and pass through all of these insane bills, which has actually destroyed California. So, he wants to talk to the other side, and he's gone on these podcasts. I mean, that's all conjecture. He's not really legislating in that manner. He's not listening to his constituents.
Right. In terms of the homelessness, it's been...
I mean, yeah, you can go down the list. I mean, it's the homelessness, it's the crime. I mean, right now, and then we obviously, we pass a new proposition in which they get rid of Prop 47, and he says, we don't have enough money to fund it. It's going to take $300 million, but yet now he's funding...
What is Prop 47?
Well, Prop 47 was where they said that anything under $900, if you stole anything $900 or under, it would be a misdemeanor and not a felony.
He denied that was taking place, by the way.
Yes, and that is what was ultimately the catalyst behind the explosion of crime in California. And then he took away a lot of power from all the local jurisdictions to be able to put people in jail, right? He let everybody out of the jails. This is a fact. He shut private prisons down. And then furthermore, when it came to the homeless epidemic in California, he disallowed cities to be able to take homeless people off the streets. He created all these layers of regulation so that you actually couldn't clean your cities up unless you were incredibly creative or you had some sort of a majority like we do to be able to clean up homelessness. And then that ultimately perpetuates crime. It's the broken windows theory.
Right now, there is no homeless problem in Huntington Beach. Why?
Two reasons. Well, a couple reasons, actually, beyond two. But primarily, number one, we built a shelter within the city because by state law, you can't just throw people off the streets unless you have a place to put them. So we built a shelter called the NAV Center in Huntington Beach where we can get people in there and try and cycle them through recovery or get them into county facilities so that then they can perpetuate that recovery. In the event they end up back on the streets, then you are allowed to arrest them and put them into another shelter outside of the city, number one. So we took it upon ourselves to create that solution. And then number two, we passed various city ordinances disallowing people from camping on streets, sleeping on sidewalks, sleeping in parks, because we all came together, and that's what the residents want. And in many cases, we had pushback by the state on so many things that we're doing within the city. We're getting pushback by the state and being sued on multiple fronts. But the thing is, we're doing it, we're pushing forward, and because of that, homelessness has dropped by 95%. Crime is down to virtually nothing, and we've got a clean, safe, good-looking city.
So it's just interesting, too, because the other backdrop has been over a year since the fires, where it turns out Los Angeles never thought they would need water and an effective fire chief and a mayor that wasn't in Ghana. And it seems as though they're using the ICE, the ICE operations in the city to whitewash that. But what's the reality for the people of the Pacific Palisades, Malibu, Altadena?
The reality is that they're still destroyed financially and obviously physically. You can go and look at the photos. None of the money that they claim they have raised to help these people have been distributed to the people, which is classic California, right? Tons of money comes in, and it's like a game of Plinko. What can actually distill down to the people who need it? Virtually nothing. And then the fraud. I mean, Spencer Pratt's been out there talking about this every single day. The fraud that went into these situations where, like, Fire Aid is just one example, right? Hundreds of millions of dollars, nobody actually got it. The recovery, not happening.
You mean they did that Fire Aid, they did that big concert, right?
Yeah.
The who's who of celebrities and musicians, and the money, we can't find it.
Yeah, it's all vanity. That's what it comes down to. Nobody's actually there to help. And that's why what we did was we said within the first 3 days of the fire, we know that the government's not going to be there to help, so we're going to step up to do that when we partner with the Dream Center. We ended up raising over $700,000, and you know what? We gave away $800,000. So we actually went above and beyond what we ultimately raised. Now, a lot of that was also in food and supplies, goods and services through the Dream Center. But the private industry is much better and more efficient at helping people. The government just doesn't care, and people need to realize that.
Charlie Kirk, did you know him?
Yeah. I mean, just by virtue of being on his show, I didn't know him really well.
Well, your thought when you were looking at the thousands that gathered, they said over 200,000 in and around the stadium where they usually host Super Bowls, and the aftermath since. You made your event last night.
Well, I think that this is a testament to how deep his influence was, especially on the younger generation. The younger generation of engaged citizens are actually good at pulling people together, older generations as well. And I think that's what's important is that nobody realized how deep his influence was and the effect that this was going to have. And, you know, to use the cliche, this is a turning point, and we're seeing it. And I think that a lot of people on the left are actually afraid of this because they don't realize is that this isn't going away. It's only getting stronger, and people have woken up.
And people that hold were woke, that they woke up. I think that the policies of the left have helped fuel Charlie Kirk's movement because people hated the cancel culture, that woke philosophy, that sense that the gender, lack of identity on gender or acknowledgement to the differences. So he passes away, and there's a few people that just can't turn off the hate and the mischaracterization, one of which is Ta-Nehisi Coates. Listen to him on the Ezra Klein show. I believe it was yesterday, Cut 23.
I think Charlie Kirk was a hate monger. I take no joy in the killing of anyone, no matter what they said. But if you ask me what the truth of his life was, and the truth of his public life, I would have to tell you it's hate. I would tell you I'd have to tell you it is the usage of hate and the harnessing of hate towards political ends.
Then let me flip that question actually a bit. Why are we losing?
And he goes on from there. Ezra Klein wrote that book about how to basically recalibrate the left and how they basically all they want to do is complain, and they don't have any programs for a different time. But does that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me because, as you said, all they're operating from is a position of hate. He has no examples by which he can prove that point. These are all just kind of worthless virtues that he throws out there, and they're not even virtuous at all, but they consider them to be virtuous. He says that he was a hate monger, but all he spoke about, everything that he talked about came through the prism of his faith, right? Thousands and thousands of years of biblical evidence proving the love that he was actually promoting, but he was having conversations which could be difficult because they buck against the norm, but he was using objective facts to make his points. There was no way in which he was targeting somebody's personal being in order to hurt them or to kind of hurt their movement. It was just about facts, but they don't operate from that perspective. And that's why he couldn't give any examples there, in addition to the fact that Klein didn't even give him any pushback.
Right, and he didn't. And if I want to listen to the whole thing, but for the most part, he walks on water, does Coates, because they feel as though he's the deep thinker of the next generation who believes America, the 1619 Project, is his ethos. Thankfully, we moved past that. Don't you feel like we always talk about the things that are disheartening? But Andrew, you've been coming on the show for a few years now. I mean, if you were coming when you 2022, we weren't seeing the light at the end of the tunnel with this political correctness. What is a woman? We almost laugh about it now. But now, huge pushback about trans people in women's sports. In fact, you have now Minnesota being sued by the federal government for ignoring that proclamation. It used to be the other way around. How dare you not let that trans guy into the locker room to get dressed in front of your daughter? That's where we're at.
Yeah, I've always had faith in the American people and kind of their inherent pragmatism. So I knew that ultimately the pendulum was going to swing. It just took some time. And it took some big, bold voices to just stand up and say, guys, really? Are we going to let this happen? And then people felt more comfortable coming out of the woodwork and saying, yeah, it's insane. But it took those bold voices. And there's many of those bold voices that were perhaps considered a little bit on the left or kind of in that moderate lane who have come out and said, yeah, this is nuts. I mean, J.K. Rowling even coming out and saying this. Now, I'm not saying that she's some virtuoso voice on the right anymore. I mean, she's probably still considered to be somewhat on the left, but the thing is she came out with that reality, that reason, and we're not using logic and reason. Logic and reason actually dispels politics, and sometimes we do need to step off of that spectrum and just look at things through a reasonable lens.
I always say it's not conservative liberal, it's sense against nonsense. Yeah. It's common sense against nonsense. And Bill Maher even said it over the weekend. And when you talk about liberals, like, why can you... if you have a great liberal mind, you just say, well, that person, I don't agree with them, but man, good thinker. I know they want to back up their school of thought. I don't know who you want to use as an example, but Bill Maher sits down for, I think, 2 hours with Charlie Kirk. He said, I found the guy really interesting, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, really God-fearing. Bill Maher's a famous atheist. And he's like, I like the guy. And it's just a tragedy. I just don't understand why other people can't see this as a tragedy.
Unfortunately, they don't have that moral compass against which they kind of guide themselves. That's really what it's come down to. Over the past, I think, 10 or 20 years, there's been this slow destruction of any kind of norm from a fundamental perspective in which we operate, right? That, as I say it again, that North Star, that moral North Star, that's gone away. And it's gone away because of the incrementalism. People are like, oh, we're just going to make this little change. It's no big deal. All these little changes have added up and ripped people away from kind of the roots that America was built upon hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, so I guess we'll see where this goes because we come up on year 250. I think America's ready to celebrate it, although I'm not too thrilled with they just ousted their leader who used to work here, who is going to organize all these things. Evidently, it's a bipartisan council, which is heavily Biden-oriented. As you look at this lockout, when you go back to work 3,000 miles away, is this going to affect you at all?
I don't know.
750,000 federal workers.
I mean, I don't know because, we hear about these shutdowns. It feels like every couple months now, and what's ultimately the effect? I mean, when they shut it down when Obama was in office, they made a big deal about it, but we didn't really see anything. Now I do feel for the people who are stressing out right now, who work for the federal government. That's an honest reality. Even we've got the Pacific Air Show coming up in Huntington Beach this weekend, and are we going to not be able to have the full litany of planes because of the federal like the Blue Angels or what have you that are ultimately under the federal purview. So there's going to be a lot of ways in which this is affected. But I think that the Congress people and senators, they should lose pay during this shutdown.
Senator Rick Scott proposed that bill. They should not get paid during the lockdown. And they're going to get it back. Everyone's going to get their pay. There's going to be back pay.
Yeah, and it's going to be a vacation.
Your real life and your thoughts about inflation when you go to buy your food. Are you raising your prices still or at a slower rate?
Yeah, we are at a slower rate. In California, we're going to raise them a little bit higher than if I was in Florida, for example, because of a lot of the state-mandated labor changes. But no one was talking. You were.
What is it per hour now?
Well, now they're pushing now in Los Angeles. It's going to be $25, $26 an hour for hotel and hospitality workers during the Olympics. For us in Huntington Beach, it's $17 an hour mandatory is the minimum. But keep in mind, that's even for tipped workers. So if you're making another $70 an hour in tips and you're making $87 an hour, the restaurant's paying full payroll taxes on those tips, as is the team member. In San Diego now, it's $25 an hour. So even local city councils are pushing it to all the way up to $25 an hour. And that's not realistic. And actually, even if you're arguing for the living wage, if you look at the MIT living wage calculator, sometimes it's lower and you don't even take into consideration, once again, the tips that they're making and the fact that we're paying full taxes on the tips. So as for inflation, no, I'm not worried about it because it has come down. In 2021 and 2022, it was upwards around 25%. It ultimately dropped down into the single digits. But we were getting hit so hard that actually purveyors were increasing their prices in the 50% range, thinking it was going to go up another 20 year on year.
Right.
So we've seen them come down. So it's kind of balancing. It's still going up, but it's balancing.
Right, and we'll see where we go because we got to get our farmers taken care of too. Andrew Gruel, chef, founder of Slapfish, and also Huntington Beach City Council member, and while raising 4 children in California. You like challenges. Andrew, thanks so much. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Let's bring in Karl Rove. Karl, when you were with President Bush during those 8 years, how many shutdowns did you guys have?
None of any consequence that I can remember. I mean, we really only had in the history of the country 3 government shutdowns that lasted more than a couple of hours or maybe a day. And this one's going to last. I mean, the Democrats are stuck. They're stuck for the wrong reason. After proclaiming for years we ought to pass clean continuing resolutions to keep the government open, they're now saying no, we can't because we hate Donald Trump. But that's not a good reason.
Right, and they keep talking about, well, we need health care. We need to restore these benefits on health care that's coming up not into November, December, but that's part of the big, beautiful bill that passed, trying to bring back some of those subsidies during the pandemic and trying to make sure people are qualified in order to get Medicaid and Medicare. So they're trying to make that the issue they're running on in the midterms. Can you see that plan in place?
Yeah, well, look, let's be clear about this. These were subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, that we did in the middle of COVID because we had a national emergency and we wanted to make certain that people had access to health care and health insurance. And the subsidies, the Democrats could have done, with Biden in office, they could have sought to continue them beyond the legislatively mandated end to those COVID era subsidies, which is the end of this year, but they didn't. So, first of all, COVID's gone. And can we afford $350 billion of additional subsidies for the Affordable Care Act that were not envisioned in the original act and which were passed by a Democrat Congress and a Democratic president, a Republican president and the Congress in the middle of COVID as an emergency measure? Look, I mean, these people want any excuse to keep spending money we don't have. And not only that, but these subsidies do not expire until the end of the year. What the Republicans said was pass the continuing resolution to keep the government open, and we'll negotiate with you on whether or not to extend some or all of these subsidies. And there are some Republicans, particularly from rural areas in the Midwest, who think these are important to the maintenance of their local hospitals. So rather than try and sit down and discuss with their colleagues a compromise, they said, hell no, we want it our way or it's the highway, and the highway leads directly to a government shutdown.
I hear you. Here's what Chuck Schumer said. Cut 12.
Their bill, they call it clean, we call it totally partisan. There was no input from Democrats. Not a single line in their bill had input from Democrats. They never consulted us. Thune didn't consult me. Johnson didn't consult Hakeem. And the bottom line is that we had a partisan bill.
Is this maddening? The continuing resolution's a partisan bill?
Hey, Chuck Schumer, hypocrite. You passed continuing resolution after continuing resolution that was, quote, clean. That is to say, you didn't take any input from the Republicans. And the Republicans, some of them voted for the continuing resolution to keep the government open. Stop being a hypocrite. We know why you're doing this. You're doing this because you're worried about a primary challenge in 2028 from AOC, and you're getting heat from the far left-wing groups in your party. But, buddy, things are starting to work against you. You had 3 Democrats vote with the Republicans to keep the government open, and you got 3 other Democrats who are retiring. Peters of Michigan, Shaheen. You got 3 more Democrat senators who are leaving the Congress and who may say, you know what, I'm going to put my country above Chuck Schumer's favorable rating with left-wing groups. I mean, come on, buddy, do what's right for the country.
You know what's interesting, Karl? Sometimes people have vitriolic personalities, abrasive personalities, and they might be good leaders. You have 2 leaders on the Republican side. They're just measured. They might be people more from business. They're not going to yell. They're not going to scream. They're not going to accuse. And it's hard to put them in a box of being, irresponsible or irrational. That's just not the way Thune and Johnson present themselves. Don't you think that helps the Republican cause?
Yes, absolutely. Both of them are sensible, reasonable people. Thune has said more than once, happy to sit down and negotiate with you, but we're not going to do it with a gun to our head that you're going to vote against keeping the government open. And just one correction. In the intro, you said Congress is leaving town. The House is leaving town. The Senate is staying in because the House has passed a clean continuing resolution. The Senate can take it up, continue to take it up, and I think Thune is right to say, you know what, we're going to periodically, during this period when the government is closed, we're going to call the Senate into order, and we're going to vote again to see if people really want to see the damage being done to our government and to our reputation for financial excellence by having the government. Our U.S. government is the biggest company, if you think about it, in the world, the biggest enterprise in the world, and we do not have a budget in place by the beginning of our fiscal year, and then we shut it down because Chuck Schumer, after being an advocate for clean continuing resolutions, now is against clean continuing resolutions. It's just sickening how he's treating our country.
All right, I'm an outsider. I look at this and I say, okay, you got to get this done by September. You have to get all your appropriations done 12, and then you got to put them up for a vote, like through committees, right? Then you got to put them up for a vote, and you hopefully wait for the Senate in committee. So they passed almost all of them. 3 passed through a joint session. The Senate's only done 3. So obviously they don't have enough time. That's why they need the continuing resolution. I know these guys need days off, but why are they taking August off? If you have a budget due in September, there's got to be some way to restructure your calendar. Am I right?
Well, yes and no. Yes, everybody wants to get out of Washington in August. But the real issue is not August. The real issue is January, February, March, April, May, June, July. And that is the time during which the appropriations process ought to work. Now, Tom Cole, the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, has done an outstanding job of trying to keep things moving in regular order. But the Senate Appropriations chairman has been attempting to do the same. But the Democrats have been dragging their heels all year long. And all of the calcification of the system that has taken decades to come into place just doesn't means it's a very tough process. But you're right. 3 big bills got passed. They got passed on big bipartisan votes. They included things like the military, but the rest of the budget did not get done. And but the problem is that the answer to that is not making the process more difficult, more partisan, and more dangerous to our country's economic health.
I want to talk about what's happening in the New Jersey race for governor. Mikey Sherrill seems to have one major problem after another. Where did you get the $7 million worth of investment since you sat on armed services and invested in defense stocks? Charlemagne the God asked her. She has no answer. And then when it turns out she graduated from military academy, which is great and it's laudable, it shows you had good grades and dedication, you didn't walk. Why? She's involved in a cheating scandal. Won't tell us why. And then we know that Democrats, when Governor Christie was there, were their energies were overflowing with oil and gas. They've changed all that by being a part of this consortium. So Mikey Sherrill's asked about rising utility costs. Listen to her explanation, cut 28.
We're going to massively increase power generation in the state so we can drive down costs for families. We're going to update and modernize our natural gas infrastructure so we can get more production from natural gas that also drive down carbon emissions. We're going to massively invest in solar and battery storage so that we can also prime in some of the cheapest power into our grid.
But this is all Democratic inflicted by Governor Murphy to keep them away from receiving what Pennsylvania and Ohio are receiving. Massachusetts and New York did the same thing. Don't tell me you're going to freeze this stuff. You're just going to destroy the business.
Yeah. As she said openly, it was a mistake for our state to not have a pipeline to get low-cost natural gas from Pennsylvania that would power our power plants and allow utility costs to drop. No, she hasn't. I don't know exactly. It sounds like she may be open to that, but that's not exactly what she said. And until the people in New Jersey understand that they will have access to a reliable, low-cost supply of natural gas from their neighbor, then utility prices are not going to drop. The rest of the stuff is going to cost money. Does she think that solar and battery technology, which is in its infancy, is somehow going to solve the problem quickly? I'll tell you what will solve it quickly, and that is getting a pipeline to the natural gas fields in Pennsylvania into New Jersey so that there's cheaper natural gas available. And talk about that has been the thing that has been driving down carbon emissions in the United States. We're the only major industrialized country in the world which has reduced carbon emissions virtually every year, and we do it not by starving our economy, but by relying upon clean natural gas in order to power our power plants.
So do you think that Jack Ciattarelli, they say it's an 8-point lead, Emerson says a flat-footed tie, Fox says it's an 8-point advantage for Sherrill. What are the percentages that you think he has of winning?
Well, I don't know, but because this is an off-year election, and the tendency in off-year elections is for the party out of power, that is to say the party not having the White House, tends to get greater turnout among its supporters. And that's going to probably be even more problematic this year because the parties now have switched positions. It used to be if you were a college-educated voter, you were more likely to be Republican, and a non-college educated voter was likely to be a Democrat. That's now shifted. And now that means that in this election, the new Republican coalition is less likely to turn out to vote because it is more dependent upon non-college educated voters. The question is whether the Republican gubernatorial candidate is running a campaign that recognizes this and is taking the steps to try and maximize turnout among the Republican base. I assume that he is. He's been through this drill before and came damn close 4 years ago. And, the polls last time around didn't catch it. Has everybody adjusted their methodology to take that into account this time around? I don't know, but I suspect they have. It's going to be an uphill climb, but it's certainly not out of the question.
It's a lot to bite off in 90 seconds, but I'm going to try. Ambassador Khalilzad, who worked with you guys, former born in Afghanistan, I think really screwed up the Doha agreement under Trump. Outlined a pretty bad deal, but I like him as a guy. He just put this out on Twitter. Although Hamas cultivates a culture of martyrdom, its leaders very much want to survive the current war that they initiated and declare victory. Therefore, it is very likely they will accept the Trump peace plan. Your thoughts about the 20 points that were released, the fact that Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan are among the Arab nations signed on to it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, look, if Hamas doesn't accept it, things are going to get really difficult for them because I think Trump's President Trump's attitude is, I've wasted a lot of time and energy and effort on it. You better agree. And look, you read the 20 points. If he can pull this off, it will be one of the great steps forward in bringing about a more peaceful and prosperous Middle East. And a brighter future for the people of Gaza, because it will mean that they will be led not by people who are looking at them as fodder for terrorist attacks on Israel and as basically a shield to protect them, the Hamas fighters, but they will be governed by people who want to have a more prosperous and a more free and a more open life for them in Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, it's very complicated. We could have 2 hours and still not cover it all. But, Karl, you had to deal with it back then. You were there when they had the vote, and they voted Hamas to lead the Palestinians. And that was their biggest mistake ever. Gave them a shot. So it's hard to believe how much history you and I have had a chance to talk through. Karl Rove, thanks so much.
You bet.